Image was so nice now. גם לא תיגרסי לראייה, סמי דרך בתקוס, לא שימי מקרבת, ונגמור זאת בנגרת, ויצטין את מישו, ואתם בסדר, וזה כל מנוסטו מתעתינת, מיתה מהיצו מצמי דרך, לא מהיצו מתימי מקרבת. ועל דרך זה, בנגרת מישו, ועל דרך זה בנגרת.
When the role of the Rebbe to learn Hilchot Abchira in the days Ben HaMetzorim, and the role of the Rebbe should give Zdoke b'shas we learn the halachos. We have today the honor to have a Choshev in German in our community, Rav Chosid, Avraham Ashkenazi, will come and give us an insight of the halacha of Beis Abchira. Rav Ashkenazi, b'vasha. Following Tilas hours, there will be a similar session.
Okay, so the topic I chose to discuss today is something which is a little Nagel Maise, which is not so easy to find in Ilchos Beis Abchira, unfortunately. Many of the halachas are only for when we need to build, when the Beis Hamikdash will be built, and everything that we're going to have. But there are some halachas that are Nagel Maise nowadays, and one of them is regarding entering the Har HaBayis nowadays. So this is what we're going to speak about. Be'ez Hashem. So first, I'd like to begin with there's a minor from the Rebbe to Rabbi Yehuda Get, who was rabbi of the Koisel for many years, over 25 years, and I believe there's like many answers that Rebbe discussed with him in regards to digging and all this stuff. And one of the minors the Rebbe speaks about the subject, and it's printed in Shulchan Mנחem. I think it's was also printed in Beis Mashiach. That's where it's from. In Kfar Chabad, I'm sorry. And I'm going to read here. Part of the letter. Let's say that Hayom Heter Aliyah al Har HaBayis. Take from Yad Latchol as Shaka V'Tareh, but they Yalu Rachman Litzlan L'Sham Kama V'Kama. ולמקום שיסורון ודאי מספרון ילך ויגדל רחמנא ליצלן. וכל הזרע בזה באם טובינה, ולאו ייצא ויסיפו מספרים מנהל. So Rebbe obviously says clearly that it's forbidden for any person to enter the Har HaBayis, also known as the Temple Mount. And he also discusses with him that he should not even be discussed in the Knesset, and the idea of having Heterim, because that's going to only make it worse, and people are going to take it as a way of discussing that maybe we should go in or not. So we know from here clearly that the law is that, according to the Rebbe, that you should not go on the Har HaBayis, but I just wanted to discuss the shittas on the subject and some background on the discussions. There are many books, and some entire books were written about this, and many articles. I'm just going to try to take some of the kitzur nimrods of what the shittas are in the background. So the Rambam in the end of Perek Vav of Hilchos Abchira, he states in different halachos about the ketushas of the Beis Hamikdash after the Churban. He states there clearly that even after the Churban, the kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash is still is there. And he explains that the Shlomo Melech was kiddush l'Salavei, and he also mentions that the way that he also explains why the kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash and it's forever. But Mashaim came to when it comes to other halachas and Zrayim, there's some stirs in Rambam, but generally speaking, we don't find that the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael was l'Salavei. So he explains because the Shechina is still there, and the Shechina doesn't leave the Mokim HaMikdash, so therefore the kedusha also remains still forever, and all the halachas that applied when Mashiach, when Beis Hamikdash was still built, likewise apply even after the Churban, that you cannot go into certain places, etc. That's the Shittas Rambam. And if we follow that, it's known that one of the krisos that at the beginning of Maseches Krisos, one of the 36 Chayav Kodesh is Abol HaMikdash Tamei, that if a person is Tamei Meis, he's not allowed to go into the Azara, he's not allowed to go to the Beis Hamikdash. So according to the Rambam, that even applies even nowadays. Now the Ravid is chilek on the Rambam right there, and then he mentions that he says that he's Svaras Atzma Yuzu, that the Rambam is coming from nowhere, he doesn't know where the source is, and he brings proofs from the Gemara. The Ravid brings proofs from the Gemara otherwise, that even though the Beis Hamikdash had kedusha in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, nevertheless, once there was a Churban, the kedusha sort of departed, and there's no more kedusha, and therefore there's no prohibition. Apparently, that's what the Rebbe said. He adds saying, there's no Kodesh if you walk into the Azara. Now, on the sheet of the Rebbe itself, there are three opinions. There are some who understand this Rebbe to mean that it's only an Isur Kodesh that there isn't. That's what's mashma from the Rebbe. It says that by Kodesh, but it's still also Midiraisa. That's one way of the sheet of the Rebbe. The second one says that there's no Isur Midiraisa, but there's still an Isur Midirabanan. So of course no Kodesh, but not even the rice, only the Rabbanan. And there's a third sheet that holds that when the Rebbe says in by Kodesh means that it's mutar legamri. Then not only that there's no Kodesh, there's no Isur the rice, and there's no Isur the Rabbanan. You're allowed to walk anywhere on the Harabayis and the Zara and the Kodesh and Kodesh Kodashim. That's what one view says in the sheet of the Rebbe. Now, interestingly enough, although the Rambam is more machmir when it comes to the kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash, nevertheless, when it comes to the idea of bringing Kirbanis nowadays, the Rambam will be more makil, that we have the ability, so to speak, of bringing Kirbanis because the kedusha is still there. Mashenk in the Ravid, if you hold like the Ravid who says that it's mutar legamri, that there's no kedusha whatsoever in the Harabayis and the Beis Hamikdash, therefore there's no way of bringing Kirbanis because it's the kedusha left. So that's one way that we have a chumrah in the Rambam in regards to the kedusha of the Harabayis, the Azara, that you can't walk there. Mashenk, you could bring Kirbanis, and the Ravid would hold the opposite if you hold that he holds them and that it's mutar. And the Maisa, we hold like both chumras that Rabbi Akiva brings, that even though one holds like this, and we can maybe pick and choose, the Rabbi Akiva says that we hold like both chumras, that we're chomer like the Rambam, that you should not walk into certain areas in the Azara and the Beis Hamikdash because of its kedusha, and nevertheless at the same time we say that we cannot be makriv Kirbanis because we are koshish for the shit of the Rebbe that the kedusha departed and you can't bring Kirbanis anymore nowadays. Now, regardless, no matter how you define shit as a Rebbe, if it's only the Raisa without a Kodesh, only the Rabbanan or mutar legamri, most of the Chachamim hold like the Rambam, that the kedusha is still there nowadays, and therefore there is a prohibition of walking into certain areas of the Harabayis, the Azara, as we shall see. And there's still an issue of Kodesh. According to most Achronim, that's how they hold, like the Rambam, that there's a few Kodesh to walk in the Azara. So let's talk about where exactly the issue applies. So the Gemara in Zvachim explains that the few of Minatera, a few of Kodesh to walk into the Beis Hamikdash, that for Tamei Meis to walk in the Beis Hamikdash applies only the Azara, and the Gemara explains that it's the area that is 187 by 135 amos, like it's brought down in Maseches Midrash. That was the measurement of the Azara. That's where the Chiyuv Kodesh applies, but it doesn't apply anywhere else. So that's what the Gemara Zvachim says. Rashi explained there how it's part of only the inside, not the outside. But that's the Malkim Azara 187 by 135. That's how it's in Maseches Midrash. That's how also the Rambam brings in the Bechira. Alamaida, the Chachamim added that they extended an issur that even though Minatayr is only forbidden in the Azara, the Chachamim added that even in the Ezras Nashim and even in part of the Harabayis up until the Chayil, that they had a seder around the Beis Hamikdash, and after that we still had the Chayil before you leave Harabayis. So the Chachamim extended the issur of Minatayr that a Tmei cannot walk into the Azara. There's also issur the Rabbanan that a Tmei cannot walk in the Ezras Nashim and not even outside of the Beis Hamikdash, on the area of the Bayis, which was inside the Chayil. That's also included in the Yisud Rabbanan. And so the Rambam Paskins in Ilchos Bias Hamikdash in Perek Gimel, he says in halacha test, Tmei Meis oitibulin shenichnas lezas nashim oyafal pishein loike makinus makas mardos. He says that you give them makas mardos because it's only Yisud Rabbanan for Tmei Meis to walk into the Ezras Nashim or right outside the Beis Hamikdash and before going out of the Chayil. So how does this work? So basically, it's based on the machnes that we had in the midpoint. So this brother in the Chumash, Rashi explained that there were three machnes. There's machne Shechina, machne Levi, and machne Yisrael. Machne Shechina is basically where the Mishkan was situated. Anywhere between the Kali and Mishkan is called machne Shechina, where the Levi would, the camp was machne Levi, and when the Shvatim was machne Yisrael. And this the same thing applies also into the Beis Hamikdash map. The same different categories of machnas apply. So the Azara is considered machne Shechina. Outside of the Azara and the whole Harabayis is considered machne Leviah, and outside of the Harabayis, the whole Yerushalayim, the Rambam explains from the beginning of Yerushalayim, the Rambam brings in the halachos that it's considered machne Yisrael. And it's brought down in Rashi Chumash. Rambam is based on the Sefer that speaks about this comparison that we compare the machnes in the Midbar with the machnes in the Harabais and the Beis Hamikdash. And then Rambam also adds there that in Perek Zayin that the Rachel as a Sonoshim Ali said about this, there was also a sort of a different in categories. Even on the Midbar, there's only 3 machnes. When it comes to the Beis Hamikdash, as we explained, there's also a different kedusha between the Ezras Noshim and right outside the Beis Hamikdash, and over the Chel, while it's in the Harabais, there's a different kedusha. And the halacha is in the Chumash that the tzarua, the person who's on the tzara, he's not allowed to be even in Machne Yisrael. He has to be in all the 3 machnes. Azav is allowed to stay in Machne Yisrael, but he cannot go in Machne Leviyah. And a Tamei Nefesh, a Tmei can even be in Machne Leviyah. The only place that he's not allowed to go is into the Chatzar HaMishkan, into the Machne Shechina. So does the Mishnah bring in the first perek of Maseches Kelim all the darkness that there are in between all the areas of the Beis Hamikdash and the Mishkan where a person is allowed to go or not. So the Maaseh, what comes out to us is that nowadays we don't have any. If you hold like the Rambam, the Kedusha still nowadays there's no tzarua. We don't have that problem of mitzvah that it cannot be in Yerushalayim, but we do have Tmei Meis. Everybody's a Tmei Meis, and also the idea of Zavim, and the Zavim is a Nida. Nida is also about carry. So the Maaseh, the halacha would be according to the Rambam that for a Tmei Meis, like everybody, there's an Isur Midiraisa with a Chiyuv Kodesh to walk into the Azara that begins from as Yisrael, as Koyanim, and the Heichel, etc. And there's also an Isur Derabanan to walk also in the Ezras Nashim and in the Beis Hamikdash, right outside the Beis Hamikdash before you get to the Chel. And right outside the Chel, you are allowed to go if you're only a Tmei Meis. But if you're Balkari, if you're a Nida, you Ledes, all those things, you're not even allowed in the whole Harabais, only outside of the Harabais, that's where you're allowed to go. So that's what comes out according to the Rambam. Not only a Tmei Meis, but even a Meis itself is allowed to go into those areas, except for the Machne Shechina, because it's brought down. The Moshe Rabbeinu in the beginning of Parashat B'Shalach that when he brought the Atzmei Yosef, Imoy, the Rambam explains in the Beis Hamikdash that the Vaikach Moshe Atzmei Yosef Imoy b'Machne Leviyah, it was within even in Machne Leviyah. So even a Meis itself, not only a Tmei Meis, but even a corpse, you're allowed to bring it into Machne Leviyah up until before you enter Machne Shechina. So that's the Shittas Rambam. Now there comes the Kaptir of Terat, which was it's a well-known sefer by Ishtar Parchi, which was a geographer, and he lived in the 14th century. And he says over there that not only does the Isur apply like the Rambam says, but the Isur for Tmei Meis applies even for the whole Harabais. That's what he says. That it's not only in those areas of the Hazara, Midiraisa, and outside the Ezras Nashim and the whole Isur applies in the right. Like we know, it's 500 ames by 500 ames. Because in Maseches, and it's probably the most well-known measurement for the Beis Hamikdash. Everybody remembers 500 by 500. So that's what he said. Now it's not so clear from him if he was saying that this is the din, and if the din is even the Isur Kodesh. It's not so clear if he's saying that the whole Harabais is Isur Kodesh, or at least there's an Isur Derabanan that it extends to the whole Harabais. Or even then maybe he's just quoting what the people were practicing at the time, that the Bnei Yisrael were not allowed, when he says they were not allowed to enter Harabais, maybe he's just stating a fact that because of the Muslims or because of the local laws that they had at the time, maybe that's what happened. But it might not necessarily be the halacha. That's what some people claimed, but that's what it says. Most people seem to say that he's referring to din, that's the halacha, regardless if it's Kodesh or not. There's an issue, a minimum. The Midrabanan that any Tmei Meis cannot enter the whole Harabais. So Bekitzu, the Shittas that Rambam holds again, Tazar is Field Kodesh, Ezras Yisrael will be Midrabanan, Ezras Nashim will be Midrabanan, sorry, and right outside of Beis Hamikdash also up until the Chel, Mashenki and everything else in the Harabais according to Rambam, Tmei Meis is allowed to go up until we get to the Chel. Mashenki in the Kapit Torah will hold that you're not allowed to the whole Harabais, the whole area, you cannot enter. That's regarding a Tmei Meis. When it comes to Balkari, Nida, Ledes, everybody agrees that there's an Isur that you cannot be in any area in the Harabais. Just Derech Aga, there are some records, there's a note from the Rambam that he mentions that he went up when he was in Eretz Yisrael, that he went up to Yerushalayim and he went up to daven in the Harabais. Some people say that it seems he went to a place to daven, and many people they seem to say that this indicates that the Rambam actually went up into the Harabais. Of course, only the areas that the Rambam would hold that you're allowed to go, not in the Azar itself. But that's there's also some other Rishonim. I believe there are some evidence that he went and they visited the Harabais. Now, but again, putting into practice of where the Harabais is, because as we explained, the Harabais was 500 ames by 500 ames, and if you look today, if you check the map of the Temple Mount, is much larger than that. Some people claim that the extension that we have nowadays of the Harabais that used to be 500 by 500, now it's more like a rectangle or a little bit different of a shape. It's not exactly a rectangle, but it's extended at least. So a lot of people say that it's because of Horus, that's what he extended, and he was the one who enlarged this original area. This discussion if the Kedusha would also extend or not. But regardless, nowadays you see that the Temple Mount is much larger than the Harabais. The Harabais is 500 by 500 ames, which if you say that an amma is 48 centimeters, it will be 240 meters by 240 meters. And if you look today, the Temple Mount is about 460 meters by 300 meters. It's almost double, at least in the length. You can almost fit two original Harabais in the current Temple Mount as we have today. So there are. I saw somebody published a video last week about the different discussion regarding the Harabais, and he mentioned that he found 13 different views of where exactly the Beis Hamikdash was located. So it's very hard to know exactly today. There are some main shittas. There are two main shittas. There's first the Shutta Radvaz, David ben Zimra, who claims that this is one of the main shittas, that he claims that the where they have now the Dome of the Rock is exactly the stone that they have there. It's exactly the Even HaShia. So using computers, you can easily take the map of the Temple Mount and calculate where the Even HaShia is. You put the map of the Beis Hamikdash according to the calculations, the map that they had, and then you can figure out where the Beis Hamikdash was located. You look at Maseches Midas. Once you know where the Kodesh HaKodashim was, you can calculate where the Zara was, where the Esnashim was. Even the Harabais, the Rambam brings exactly how far the walls of the Beis Hamikdash was from each walls of the Harabais, so you can definitely find out where the Beis Hamikdash was located. I made an image. There are many found you can find online, but just to give you a clue of how the proportion of what the red is the Temple Mount and the blue would be the Harabais according to the Advaz. If you put the Kodesh HaKodashim exactly on top of where the Dome of the Rock is, you can see that there's a lot of room here outside of the Harabais that it's not necessarily Harabais and Talaka. So that's one sheet of the Shutta Radvaz. Some claim that the stone, there is a stone in the Dome of the Rock, but that's not the Even HaShia where the Kodesh HaKodashim was. That was actually where the Mizbeach was. So you have to move the Beis Hamikdash over 100 ames to the right. So then you have a different calculation, and then you have 11 other shittas that will say that it was in a different, totally different place. And depending where you locate the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to end up having the map of the Harabais, which could be anywhere, mainly everywhere where the map of the Temple Mount is nowadays. Then you have other considerations that take into consideration. Other things you have to take into consideration is that even if you place the map exactly as it is, you can also put in different angles. Even though you say that the Kodesh HaKodashim is exactly where the Even HaShia was, even though the Radvaz already tells you exactly how far it is, but it could be that it was a little this way, a little that way. It's not exactly a rectangle, as I mentioned before, so the angle might change. And number two, we don't know which Ameh to use. I mean, nowadays, Lalacha, we follow 48 centimeters, but who said maybe the Beis Hamikdash 500 Amehs was much larger than that, and all the measurements are going to change. So that's another thing that you have to consider when applying Lemaisa where the Harabais was located. So Lemaisa, that's what the most poskim hold. Nowadays, the whole area of the Temple Mount is at least a Safek Kodesh, because we don't know exactly where the Azara is, according to the Rambam. And that's what most Rishonim and hold. That the Isu Kodesh nowadays, even to walk into to any part of the Azara. So because we don't know exactly where the Beis Hamikdash is, so there's anywhere in the Temple Mount there's a Safek Kodesh, and therefore you're not allowed to go in. As simple as it is. That's what overall the majority of Rishonim and later poskim hold nowadays. Now, even if you would know exactly where the Beis Hamikdash is, there's still reasons to say that a person should not walk into the Harabais. There are many reasons brought down. The number one, even if you allow some people to go, you have to remember that the Harabais itself, a Baal Keri cannot go. So even if a Tomimis can go into certain areas outside of the Harabais, but a Baal Keri will not be able to go, and you have to go to the mikvah. You have to go. There's many halachos that have to follow. So you have to, if you allow some people to go, many people would go without these preparations. You have to remove your shoes. You can't go with money. There's also something called Meir Mikdash, So if you allow some people to go, many people will not follow these rules. That's one reason why we even if you know where exactly is, you should not allow people to go. And it's also very sad that these people are not going to be careful where to walk. If you tell them they can walk this way and this way, it's like a minefield. Not everybody's going to be careful not to walk in certain areas. The tefillah has to be minatera, has to be like a kosher mikveh for women, and they have to make sure to remove any chatzitza. So that's another reason why a person we should not allow people to go to the habayis. And also the chashash of zavim in men, and in men mainly regarding women, there's chashash of nida, there's chashash of yuledes or zava, even nida nowadays. Every single woman is considered nida, so nobody goes to the mikvah, so it will be very problematic. Now, just as a piece of information, there are some very, very few poskim in Eretz Yisrael who do allow people to go in Harabayis, if you can call them poskim zmanim, who do permit outside the chel. So they somehow have their map of where you can walk, that it's outside the chel, tmeimos can go in, but you have to be tovel again, like I mentioned, there's many halachas they have to follow. You tovel, you can go right away, you don't have to wait for Harib Shemesh, because even a Tul Yom can go in those areas. And there's also many government laws that you have to keep. There's certain hours, certain days that you can go in. There's certain things that you might try, you might go, like you can daven when you can go, etc. But we're not going to get into that. Just to note that there's a lot of many mikdash. Rambam has a whole parak to speak about this. That even the Ravid holds that nowadays, even though there's no kedusha, there's still the lot of many mikdash. There's no kedusha, but there's still the lot of many mikdash. So even the Ravid would hold that you have to follow those rules, even if there wasn't any kedusha nowadays in the Azara, like we mentioned before. Just to mention quickly, there's some that hold that claim that nowadays maybe there's perhaps in the Shalish Regalim there's a mitzvah to go there and bring Kirbanis, and they claim that that's there's a mitzvah to go into the Harabais, into the Beis Hamikdash and market Kirbanis, but that's very incorrect for two reasons. Number one, the whole mitzvah of going to the Beis Hamikdash to bring Kirbanis is to go into the Azara, and as you mentioned, the Rama holds that it's a Yisur Kodesh, and even according to the Ravid, it's either Yisur the Rais or Yisur the Rabbanon. Only one shita holds it's mutar. That's number one, and you can't go into the Azara, so there's no point of going. And number two, even if you would say that you follow the Ravid and it's mutar to go, you're going there and you're not bringing in a carbon, because the Ravid holds that you cannot bring a carbon nowadays. So there's a lav of loyal panay dekom that the Rosh Hashanah. You're going there and you're going to do a lav, so there's no point of being the time and I say when you're going to do a lav. So it's really a shvach argument to say that nowadays in the Rosh Hashanah should go. Finally, there's some other discussion on this topic, such as politically, what as Yidden, what should we do regarding who should be there, who should be allowed to be there. I think the government has some authority in there, and what about the IDFs, etc. I'm not going to get into that. There's also the shayla if you're allowed to fly over the Azara or certain parts of the Beis Hamikdash. If you want to, for whatever reason, fly over that thing. The Avid of the Azara is considered if there's an Isur of Knisa there. And then there's another thing that's very negative to us is if you're allowed to touch the Koisel Amaravi, because many people there's a machlokes if the Koisel is the wall of the Azara or if it's the wall of the Harabais. So some people the people that hold that it's the wall of the Azara, they say that you cannot touch the wall of the Koisel, you can't enter notes into it. So what's the maskana? So the machlokes is a poskim on the matter, and most poskim hold that you're allowed to. There's no prohibition. Just a few poskim say that you should avoid, but most poskim say it's okay to touch and to enter things in it. And interestingly enough, there's it's brought down in the Sifra that the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he visited Eretz Yisrael to Pish Pites, so he was there and he was by the Koisel right after the Mincha. So he asked one of the locals there if there was a minute to kiss the Koisel, and he said yes. When he answered in the affirmative, so it's brought down that the Frierdiker Rebbe touched and then kissed the Koisel. And there's also brought down in the Skashos and some Gilunas that there was many Gedolei Yisrael that came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would inquire very often about this halacha, this shayla halacha, if you're allowed to touch or enter notes in the Koisel, if yes or not, and he would ask the Moedim of good, etc., what the halacha is, what they're nohig, etc. And it's brought down the one time the Rebbe, somebody asked the Rebbe if you're allowed to put enter notes into the Koisel, and the Rebbe said yes, but we should do it with a stick. You shouldn't do it directly with your hand. That's what's recorded. Just want to conclude with another letter that's brought down from the Rebbe, and they publish here in the notes in the Shulchan Mנחem. Interestingly, though, it comes from Beis Chayenu. It was published in one of the Gilenis of Tafshin Nun Aleph. But they have two mistakes here. One, they put the wrong page, and then number two, it says over there that it's a minor that the Rebbe answered to somebody who asked that he was thinking about going to the Harabais. But if you look in the original, it says that he did go up to the Harabais. And the Rebbe answers to him as follows: "Api Torah Kodesh Animud behilchos biner bis Mikdash Ma'ale Olav Akosu Kilo Mishtate Bibinone Vein Bozek Boles Vashenki Belia Baharabai." So it is border the Maki Mutter Adia Asked Lotzino now. The Rebbe is saying that if going out to the Harabai, as he explained, there's many agbolas, there's many limitations of where, how you can go. There's many problems. Hashem in learning the halachos of Harabai, learning the halachos of Bechira. There's no agbolas in that, so we should do that. And maybe we show maybe Zeicha that we'll have Mashiach. And as it says in the end of Cheskel, that the Harabai in the Mashiach comes will be 36 times larger. It's going to be Rashi explains in the Perek Membeis in the Cheskel that it's going to be 3,000 ames by 3,000 ames. Maybe Zeicha that should be a big revelation.
Mr. Shem following philosophies will be a seal and who else?